Okay, bring us in, Tom.
And we are back. The Tom and D Show, the Tom and D Podcast. And Darren, what in the hell is going on with your background? Now, we do a video portion of this show, which airs a week later. And anyone watching that on YouTube or whatever will see
They're going to hate it. Yeah.
What's going on here?
Why? I'm in a hotel room.
Okay.
I'm actually in Denver, where I live, but I didn't think I was going to be here. So my house is Airbnb'd out and I'm in a hotel room and it's got a shitty background. So this is the lesser of the evils.
You didn't make the bed, did you?
I didn't make the bed. Tom and D.
Two middle-aged idiots. Well, as you can tell by my background, there's lots of boxes because I am officially on the road. Well, the day we're recording this, it'll be a week from today. I'll be 6 a.m. driving straight through to Bloomington. And I was thinking about this. Obviously, I'm really excited about moving there. And I'm living right next door to your sister. I think we may have mentioned this. It's very strange.
Yes. Yeah.
The house is literally next door to your sister. Unplanned, but
so crazy. Yeah.
So I was thinking of
laws in Indiana, just so you know. I'm pretty certain.
I think they have to be. Well, she's not a cousin, so I guess it would be legal. No, but so I've decided that what do I want to bring on that kind of make me excited about my move, and I thought about it and said, you know what? I know this guy in Bloomington. I met him actually at the media school's career day reception, and he is the associate dean of the media school. Really? And this guy also has a podcast with tens of thousands of listeners on IU Sports. He also is a musician. He's working on another new album, and he's a father, a husband, and a great all-around guy, and my new boss.
No.
Yes.
Seriously?
Yeah, I'm serious. Let's bring him on.
All right.
Galen Clavio.
Galen, how are you?
Good. Good to see you all.
Good to see you.
Nice to meet you.
Now, the last time I saw your face, I was watching the Indiana State game, and I'm watching it. And this is the night that I got my offer on the house, and I had gotten the offer accepted in Bloomington. So I'm sitting there in a great mood, getting ready to watch an ass kicking, which it was that game.
It was.
And then all of a sudden they said, let's go down to the sideline with a little bit more about Hoosier the Bison, and whose handsome face shows up but yourself. That was a fun interview.
Yeah, it was a good time. Although, as I've tried to tell people, when they contact you earlier in the week and say, we need you to come on in the third quarter to talk about the mascot, that means they're expecting a blowout and nobody will be watching at that point in time. So I acknowledged I was supposed to be filler. I was still grateful that they had me come on.
Yes,
that was great. I saw that bit. That was fantastic. I had no idea about the history of that.
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing, and it's one of those where the school had a mascot and then it didn't for a long time. But it's such a recognizable thing for so many schools across the country now. It's like you're missing out if you don't have one. And I'm glad that we were able to bring it back. It really is, I think, going to make a big positive impact on the overall image of the university athletic programs moving forward.
So just for our listeners, can you clarify what that mascot is and why it's not actually a Hoosier, and what the hell is a Hoosier?
Yeah, well, so it's a bison, and it's actually called Hoosier the Bison. I'll come back to the Hoosier part in a second. But people aren't really aware of this, but bison used to roam freely all the way into the Midwest and all the way down to Kentucky. Like if you guys look like the type of people who would you maybe drink bourbon occasionally. And if you've ever heard of Buffalo Trace, that's not just a random name. That was an actual pathway that the bison would use to migrate across the Midwest and back into the plains. And so if you look at the state seal for the state of Indiana, there's a bison on the state seal. They were here when the Europeans got here, and then we killed them all. And so that's where the origin came from, as a direct historical tie. Bison are also tough. I think you want a tougher looking mascot. And they named it Hoosier to somewhat answer the question of what is a Hoosier, because nobody knows. No one's really sure. That's just one of those things that's been passed down lore-wise over the generations. So maybe this will end the questions and just define it from this point forward.
That's awesome.
I think we probably all have our own stories. Maybe it's all, like you said, lore at this point. And about what it is, but I heard there's a story about, there's a politician that was going around, and I don't know when and what they're running for, but it was something like, who's your favorite congressman, or who's your this?
And then I had heard the one where they knocked on the door. Someone knocked on the door, and the guy said, "Hoosier, Hoosier." So they said, "Oh, Hoosier."
And then there's the one that I've heard, which is there was a guy named John Hoosier, very generic name, who led a bunch of people over the Ohio River from Louisville because there was work on this side of the river. They were known as Hoosiers men, and that just got shortened to Hoosiers at some point. So
see, that makes the most sense out of all of them, to be honest.
I agree.
And I haven't heard that one. Darren, have you heard that one?
No, I love it.
My big thing, and I grew up in the state of Indiana. I've taught at IU for 16 years. I never realized until much later in life that the word Hoosier is actually in many parts of the U.S. used as a derogatory term towards unintelligent people.
Great.
Yes, I've heard it in movies.
That's why you offered me the job.
Yeah, so I'm glad to maybe put a different definition on things moving forward. I think this is a nice change of pace.
Yeah, we got to change that quickly.
What movie was it used as a derogatory slur? I mean,
I need to go back and look. I cannot remember it off the top of my head. I will look it up though and find. But I mean, you can even just search like ChatGPT, and they've there's several circumstances, especially like in St. Louis. Instead of calling people rednecks or hicks, they would call them Hoosiers, and I think that's spread into some other parts of the country. So maybe let's just keep that under wraps because maybe people aren't aware of it.
Well, I'd rather be that than a Boilermaker or a Buckeye any day.
That's right.
That's right. Oh, Boilermaker's a terrible name. I got a funny story about Purdue. My father was a great golfer in high school. He was like the state champion, like in high school, and was offered a full ride to Purdue. And he went and visited the campus, and he said, the only thing beautiful about this campus is the golf course, and I'm just not wanting to spend 4 years here. So we ended up walking on at North Carolina. So because he said the campus was much prettier there.
Well, it is much. Having been to both, there's no comparison between those two.
Now, you may not know this, Galen, but Darren went to North High School and grew up in Bloomington, and he graduated undergrad and grad from IU's theater department. So
that's excellent.
That's right. Yeah. So you said you grew up in Indiana. Did you go to Indiana?
I did. Yeah. So I grew up ironically in the West Lafayette area, but as an IU person. I'm a fourth generation IU person. My great grandparents went here. I had grandparents on my mom's side that went here, and so on and so forth. And so I came here as a freshman in 1997, and I was a sports broadcasting student and graduated in 2001 and went off and did radio for 5 years, and then eventually wound my way back into grad school. Took a little detour, taught at the University of Miami in Florida for a couple of years, and then I came back to Bloomington, and I've been here full time basically since 2009.
You told me something interesting when we had a little interview, because I was bragging about the fact that I'm a third generation Hoosier. I'm like, oh, this ought to impress the guy that my mom went there and my grandparents. And then you're fourth generation. You told me an interesting story about an accident that happened to your great grandfather. Do you want to share that one?
Yeah, I mean, these were farmers in Western Indiana, and that would have been the plan to go farm. And my great grandfather got thrown off a horse and broke his legs when he was, I think, 17 or 18 years old, which kind of causes a change in direction in terms of what you're going to do farming wise. And so ended up tracking into law school. And so that's when the relationship with the university began. And that was back in 2008, 2009, somewhere in that, or excuse me, 1908, 1909. I was
going to say.
20 years, not 20 years. But yeah, that's, and then that relationship continued through my grandparents on my mom's side. And again, my grandfather was a lawyer that came here. And so it's been a great connection across the course of generations, and one I really didn't even know before I moved here. Like my mom told me well after the fact that was the case.
Now your parents met didn't they meet at IU?
They did. Yeah. My mom came here. She was a radio TV student back in the late 60s. And I guess that's where the broadcasting comes from for me. And then my dad had moved here because my grandfather got stationed in Bloomington And so they just happened to meet at just the right time in the mid 60s. And so then I came along 10 years later. It was great
There
for
you
everybody.
go.
So you're now teaching, and what's your role again with the department?
There's a lot of roles. So basically, my primary job now is associate dean. I'm in charge of all of the undergraduate programs for the media school. Now, the area that I do most of my teaching and where most of my administrative experience is from is sports media. So I run the whole sports media program, which involves everything from broadcasters and writers and social media specialists to production people to people going into management and more behind the scenes things like sales and podcast producing and whatnot. And that's in conjunction with also having to look over all the other curricular areas of the school. So I really try to help manage all of those. We schedule classes, we hire people to teach, which is where you come into the picture here. And it's an interesting area because media changes so often because of technology and because of the way that, the fact we're sitting here talking on StreamYard, going to be put on both YouTube and Apple TV. None of these things existed 25 years ago, like literally none of them. And so trying to stay abreast of what's going on in the industry and make sure that students are getting the education that they need, whether they're going through into content or production or some other area, while also realizing you're at a university where, change is like, the proverbial turning of a battleship. Makes for a very interesting set of challenges, but it's also a lot of fun. We get a lot of great students, and it's great to work with them directly and try to help them launch their careers in an industry that'll change again in 10 years,
With that, this is something that really, really intrigues me, because I have my own media production company. I hire a lot of people, produce a lot of content. And, I feel like there is this never ending change that's happening, of course, but there's also a lot of things that are constant in it, with storytelling. And, what is it that you try to focus on telling your students or guiding them, into their careers? What is it that you wish you would teach more of that maybe you're not doing right now?
That's a good series of questions.
That was a lot.
No,
Yeah.
it's okay. The core components that I try to emphasize in everything that we're teaching is learning and understanding the tools that make media, and the fact that a lot of the things that when we were in school, production was way over there and content was way over there. And even within content, like I was a radio student, radio had its own pathway. It was different than television. It was different than writing. Writing is really a core component of everything that we do, whether you're actually sitting there and typing a script out or whether you're simply learning how to use the English language in a way where you can communicate professionally with other people. So that becomes a huge building block, regardless of what we're teaching and whatever area that we're in. But also understanding, like, video editing to me is as important now as writing, because so much of what we're doing is communicating through visuals. And it is such a simple skill to pick up. And there are apps like CapCut or Instagram edits, not to mention things like Adobe Premiere or Final Cut, where you've got access to a very streamlined editing process to help tell stories. That's another core component that we're trying to get everybody to learn, regardless of what pathway they're going down. And then you throw in things like, how does media law work? We live in a world where you've got copyright issues that you don't even anticipate, and you've got IP, intellectual property things that you have to consider. The ethics of how to use media for good. We see a lot of media not necessarily being used for good out there right now. So we want our students to understand the implications of the messaging and the fact that it does have a huge psychological impact on audiences. So those things, along with like the theory and history, like I've always believed at a school like Indiana, which historically has only taught the theory and history stuff and hasn't done a whole lot of the hands-on, we need to be able to teach students both of those things, because 25, 30 years ago, you could expect some kind of training from the places that you went to work, or at least a longer runway for an incoming student. They don't get that now. They're expected to come fully formed out of college, knowing how to create media or produce media, expecting to have been in environments or go to get a grad degree somewhere, which I think is a waste of money if you're going into communications. So we got to pack all that into 4 years, and we got to make sure that students understand what direction they might be going in and what the different alternatives are. So ultimately, I don't know if that answers your question, but those are all the things that are on my mind when I'm trying to think about this stuff.
It does. And I'm really thrilled to hear that, especially understanding about copyright. And I know you're probably just scratching the surface of that because it's so deep, but understanding at least a little bit about IP and a little bit about ethics too. I think that's so important, especially in this new media.
Yeah. It's
so, and I'm wondering too, do you get into any of the business side of things?
I mean, it's something that we are definitely focusing more on with students in this area. This is a tough one because, again, there was always this delineation in higher ed between trade schools that taught you these businesses and then institutions of higher learning that didn't bother with that. They didn't sully themselves with those things. But again, the business aspects are so intrinsic to media because so many people are having to learn to be entrepreneurs. So many people are going into areas where they're being asked to put together the financial elements to go alongside with the production and creative aspects. We have to be able to teach students those things. And so one of the areas we're trying to develop actually with the business school here at IU is a degree in media entrepreneurship or media innovation, where we're not just teaching you skills, we're not just teaching you IP and law and ethics, but we're also really diving deep into what do you need to think about from a business perspective, and how do you elevate what you're doing into something that you can make a living off of, whether it's as a full-time person or as a freelancer, as one of a number of different things that you might be up to.
Yeah, we've had several guests on that have talked about that, and one of the things is it's like if you're a creative artist, the last thing on your mind is like if you're a painter is how am I going to sell my paintings? Or it's like, no, I'm in the studio painting. I don't give a shit about, how it's sold. I'll have my manager or my agent book a showing at some gallery. But in this day and age, we had the guy that creates a lot of the Star Wars stuff. He does all the painting of all the Star Wars stuff that you see. And, there's a huge marketing behind that and business things. And we've had lawyers on that have talked about ethics and copyright and things like that. And most people, when they're in that creative side of business, don't really think about the other side of it. And that is something that, like you said, to be a successful entrepreneur, especially, you've got to have somewhat of an understanding of both.
And look, it's something I wish I'd had more in. No one ever came and said to me in 2000 or 2001 when I was getting ready to finish, you really should take some classes in Kelly. Or, you really should, which is our business school. And it would have been very, very helpful. But it's just not been part of the package up until very recently. I mean, I do a lot of work with social media influencers, both younger ones and ones that have been in the field for a while. And I was talking with one the other day who's very successful. She has over 120,000 followers on Instagram. And, she was like, I wish I'd taken some business school courses about this stuff when I was in school. So now we're in the mode of trying to ensure that people are leaving with those skill sets built in, with the idea that there's a theoretical, conceptual component to that, but there's also a practical component. They don't have to be treated as completely separately. It's just a lot of times in higher ed, it takes a while to get everybody else to agree that, yes, this is something we need to be thinking about. But this is where having stayed active as a media creator while being an educator and someone who's in charge of curriculum has been really helpful to me, because as I manage my own podcast, I'm thinking about those things, and I'm thinking about when I'm doing shows and what audience impact is and what sponsors I might be able to get and what my responsibilities are and how much I have to pay people if I want to have them come in and produce. I just don't know that you get that experience. And if you're only thinking about it when you're doing it, you're already behind the eight ball, is I guess how I would put it. So I want to prep people ahead of time as best as I can.
One thing that I found very intriguing is your podcast, your IU Sports podcast, and I've since been paying closer attention, obviously, because I've got a tie directly to you. And what a great season we're having in football, and an exciting upcoming basketball season. Tell us a little bit about how that podcast started, the name of it, and you've got quite a few followers, and then we'll maybe talk about the business end of that and how that comes into play.
Yeah, I appreciate it. No, so like I said, I was a radio broadcaster professionally before I took the detour into academia. And when I left radio broadcasting, I thought my broadcasting career was over, and I was okay with that. Like, I mean, it was one of those things you just do. But then back in 2006, I started a blog because sports blogging had started to become this really interesting space.
Yes.
But everybody had a blog at that point, it felt like. And so we were looking for ways to differentiate what we did, because it was me and a cluster of like 3 or 4 other guys that just liked writing about sports and talking about sports. And we figured out how to use Skype. You guys remember Skype?
Oh yeah.
It's still around.
Yeah.
Darren uses it all the time.
We
And AOL.
I gave it up. Yes, that's it. I'd explained to somebody the other day what instant messenger was. It's
Right.
like, wow, man, that wasn't that long ago. But we figured out how to record those conversations, and we started kind of a general sports podcast. But my friend Scott Caulfield, who co-hosts CrimsonCast, is the name of the show with me, was like, what if we created an IU basketball and football specific podcast? Because there is none right now. And this was back in late 2008. It was right when Kelvin Sampson had been fired. Tom Crean had just started. And I was like, yeah, sure. I mean, we honestly looked at Inside the Hall, which is a well-known IU basketball website, as inspiration. It's like, well, why don't we become the audio version of that? So we started this pod in, again, late 08, which was very early. I mean, the only podcasts we had to look up to were like the Bill Simmons show. That was really it. There really wasn't much else out there that you could easily find. And for the first 4 years or so, pretty much nobody listened because IU sports were pretty terrible back then. I remember there was one time a letter to the editor in the Bloomington Herald Times about that mentioned our podcast, and we were like, wow, someone listened. This is incredible. But what ended up happening was a bunch of things occurred with IU basketball where it became it got more popular that season in 2012. And then in 2013, we started using some different technologies. And then eventually it just started to grow along with other podcasts. Around 2017, audience really picked up, and it's continued to grow. We've had a huge amount of growth lately because IU football suddenly got good. And we've always been like the one place consistently where you could go and hear someone talking about IU football, which always felt like kind of, masochism on our part up until very lately. But then it's like, hey, you do that for long enough and eventually things fall into place. And so now the football episodes are more popular than the basketball episodes. And it's been, a really good overall, experience, not just doing the show, but now that we've been on YouTube for a couple of years, the number of people who recognize me, recognize Scott, recognize that the show exists and like come up and want to talk with us when we're out at games or just out in the wild is really heartening. And it just kind of drives home how this has become a spot within the media landscape where people want to go to hear about their most interested or favorite things. Because there's, you don't get a lot of IU football talk on the national scene. You don't get a ton of talk even locally, except at like the Indy Star, but that's behind a paywall. So it's an interesting thing now business-wise because, we have sponsors, but we don't charge a subscription fee for anything. We do have a Substack, but that's really only for like special stuff. So we're not making a huge amount of money on it, but we are starting the process of monetizing it more. And the audience is now there that can support that kind of thing.
And you're having a lot of fun, obviously. I mean, you look forward to it. I mean, you are the busiest person I know. Everything from, your full-time job alone as a professor would take up a lot of time. And then you throw in, the administrative side of it with the dean work and the undergrad work. And then you throw in all the stuff that you do with sports. I mean, I remember trying to get in touch with you and you're like, well, I'm busy this week. I'm going down for Big Ten Media Week and you were down there. Now, are you able to take some of that stuff and kind of combine them? I mean, you're down there interviewing maybe for something and you're saying, oh, I could use this for the podcast, or, did you find the two can kind of intersect?
Yeah, I mean, there's some crossover in what I do. Like we get a lot of students involved in the behind the scenes stuff with the production, sometimes even the front of house stuff. I mean, I hosted a show for the entirety of last football season where I had a a student co-host and then a student producer, and they did amazing work. And we've got another show this year that we're doing where we've got 2 student producers helping out with that show. So there is some crossover. And my thing is this: I enjoy podcasting. I've got a bunch of other podcasts that I do on a more intermittent basis. It's just something I enjoy, and so a lot of my leisure time will be going and doing a podcast for 30 minutes or an hour. And people are like, God, that's a lot of work. And it's like, I do it so often, it doesn't feel like work.
Right. And if you enjoy what you're doing, I mean, even like, the opportunity you presented me at Indiana, it won't really feel like work because I'm so passionate about voiceovers, and I really want other people to understand the importance of a voice in so many different aspects of production and in life that, is it going to really be work? I mean, am I going to be sitting there saying, man, I have out a class I got to teach tomorrow. This is going to suck. I got these students that don't pay attention. I mean, these students are going to be into what you're doing, especially if you've got passion yourself as a teacher.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And look, there'll probably come a point where I'll want to pare back a little bit, but I feel like I've got a good work-life balance overall. You're always monitoring that if you're smart. I think that, but the flip side of it is I also don't like sitting around and not doing things. Like, I don't watch a ton of television other than sporting events because I have to do that for my job. I get plenty of time to read at various spots. I listen to a ton of podcasts because I have dogs and I walk them. And, it's like that you find ways to combo 2 or 3 things at once. I think that's just how my brain operates. And I just think some people are like that in terms of, I'd rather be doing something than not doing anything. And so I've now at a point in my life where I can do a bunch of things and have them all have a positive impact in some way.
So there must be something that you're planning, wanting to develop then. If you're always bouncing back and forth, I bet there's that thing that you're itching to do, like write a feature script, shoot one. What is it that that big thing?
At this point, I mean, look, the podcast has kind of become the big thing. And I look at it from the perspective of, we've really been in a growth phase here lately where I've been adding producing to my repertoire. I've been adding more social media stuff and kind of trying to grow the business. I mean, I've already written a textbook. I wrote a solo authored textbook about social media and sports. That was like 120,000 words. I don't think I'll ever want to do that again. So I can cross that off the list.
I wouldn't want to voice that. I mean, if I get a script that's that long, I'm like, dude, you better be paying me a shit ton of money.
Yeah, that was a bit much, but it was one of those where I knew exactly how I wanted it to go. I didn't want to have to rely on other people. I mean, I've got 2 kids. They're wonderful. We do a lot of fun things together. I've got, I've traveled to most of the places in the world that I wanted to travel already. So, at this point, it's like I'm enjoying what I've created rather than thinking, God, there's something else I want to create at this point. I did something last year that had always been, on the bucket list, I guess, which was go to every football game in a year, home and away. So I traveled I was here for all of the home games. I went to all the road football games for IU, went to the playoff game. 2 years ago, I did something that I'd always wanted to do. I drove all the way across country. We stayed for a month on vacation out in Hermosa Beach, in LA, then drove the whole way out and drove the whole way back, so at this point, I don't have any real big things that I haven't already done, but I'm enjoying all the things that I'm doing at this point.
And that's important.
Reframing that question, where's that sweet spot for you then of the stuff that you like to do? Is it podcasting? Is it teaching, sports and social media?
Well, it's like Tom mentioned, the music thing. Like, that's something I really enjoy doing on the side. I got to get in the right headspace to do it. But writing songs and recording demos and trying to do production at home has been something I've been doing since I was 15 years old.
So what kind of music?
I mean, it's like indie rock, kind of, my influences are, Neil Young and the Rolling Stones and
Sure.
Wilco. And, there's some music I'm just not technically good enough to play, but I try to mix a bunch of different influences in. And that's been fun. I did a whole album last year of songs that I had written or things that I had tried to put together over time. I'll do another one of those at some point. Like Tom mentioned, I've been kind of starting and stopping with that. But I'm one of those people that I'll get into a cycle where I'll do something for 3 to 6 months. I'll scratch that itch and then I'll move on to something else. Like I love playing video games, but I do them in a cyclical manner where I'll do a whole video game in 3 weeks and then I won't play another video game for 3 months. So it's like a really advanced form of ADHD, I guess, but I think for my brain, what I've gotten comfortable with over the course of my lifetime is that I need to satisfy an urge and I'll dive deep into that. And when I've satisfied it, I'm like, I'm good for a while.
Yeah.
And then I'll move on to something else. And I realize I can always go back to the things that I was doing earlier if I really want to.
It really blows me away. First of all, we both graduated from from the telecom thing. We're both huge Indiana football and basketball and sports fans. My first gig was a morning show in Evansville. I graduated from Indiana, and literally my first job was doing the mornings on 103 GBF. So we both have radio background. We're both now
and
teaching.
My first job was also in Evansville, by the way.
No way. What station?
I don't even remember the station. It was an AM station, but I wasn't working for the station. I was the play-by-play broadcaster for the Evansville Otters, the independent baseball team there. Was that WVHI? Maybe, I forget. Like, it was an AM station. It was a Christian station. They would occasionally preempt the baseball broadcasts because the pastors who would pay for airtime would be paying more money than the baseball team did for the airtime, stuff like that. But yeah, that was where my first full-time gig was.
That's crazy. And then, do you remember Dan Agursky? He used to be the voice of USI. He was my sports guy in my morning show. But then it's like, and there's other things. I'm also a musician, and I'm also kind of a singer-songwriter, and I've done a couple albums myself. I just look at all these things, and I said, I think I found my new best friend in Bloomington, but A, he's going to be too busy for me, and B, I got to be on my best behavior, or he'll fire me over beers.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Okay, so if you're Tom's new boss now, I got to hear about your expectations and what the plan is for this next year. And are you starting your class in January, Tom? Is that it?
January 12th. Is that the date?
Yeah, that's the beginning of the spring semester.
Yeah, I think my class is on Tuesday, Thursday, so it'll be January 13th, which will be my first.
Yeah. So no, I mean, look, when I met Tom and we talked about what his interests were, look, my big background obviously is in radio and broadcast and performance. And that's an area that I've always wanted to build out more in terms of the course offerings that we have. And we just haven't had that many people available who made sense in the classroom to teach that specific type of a thing. But I think we're at a point now where that's something we can integrate and put on top of what we're doing, because it's not just traditional like radio broadcasting, it's podcasting, it's television, it's games and narration around. I mean, there's so many different things that we already do in the media school, documentary narration that can tie into that. And so I looked at that course idea and I was like, that makes a ton of sense in terms of being able to connect people to that skill set.
And plus, who else is going to move to Bloomington to teach one or two classes? It's
Exactly.
I did want to tell you some news that I haven't shared with you. I remember during our interview, you mentioned that you wanted to get more involved in doing stuff with the music school. And you are going to be proud of me. Stravinsky's Soldier Tale is going to be performed at the starting of November, and I am doing the part as the reader. So I'll be on stage with the orchestra reading this intense part of Stravinsky's. I guess it would be it's an hour and 30 minutes long. So I guess it's almost like a whole symphony. But I'm thinking about the inroads that we could create there. Because if they look at me and they say, oh, this guy did a great job in his performance, he's got such a grasp. And you knowing that you want to start tying in some stuff with the media school. And also I'm thinking for some of the smaller productions that they do there, find students that I work with and that you work with and say that this person would be great at narrating this particular part of this thing. So I've already got my feet in before I'm even started work, and I've already got us a little into the music school. So
that's great. No,
you're welcome.
Thank you. Yes. So all the connections help greatly. And that's the thing. So much of being in a university structure, university is huge. We have close to 50,000 students. There's all these academic structures, and historically they've all operated on their own. And I think we're in an era now where people are looking around in higher ed and saying, well, wait, why is the business school over there and the media schools over here? Why aren't you guys doing more together? And it's like, well, now we feel like there's an incentive to do more of that.
Yeah, for sure.
And so it's the same thing with the Jacob School of Music and the media school. We already have some ties, mostly in like scoring for games, but there's more that can be done on that front. And so I think that those types of connections are just invaluable when it comes to
absolutely. I mean, first of all, if you're studying music at the Jacob School of Music and you have an opportunity to help with a video game that someone in the media school is putting together, and you're not getting paid for it, but you're going to be a credit on this, and who knows where it could lead down the road, but it's an opportunity for both. Why not take advantage of that? I mean, it's right there in front of us.
That's right. And that's ultimately, a lot of our students will not be in directly one area or another, but they will be in some new area that's in between two things. That's one of the things I've been trying to tell students for years is, we offer some specific directions because it's easy to get hyped as a college student about being a sports media student or being a music performance major. But what you're going to find career-wise might not be specifically that. We want you to have the skill sets available to kind of rotate between different opportunities. So the earlier we can pattern that and show people these are like the headline items, but there's a lot of stuff in between the headlines. I think that helps a ton.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what sort of guidance do you give to your students then about, going out into the field, whether it's what they're specifically studying or not? And do you help bridge that?
Yeah. Well, so we have a career readiness process here within the school where we have two different career preparedness classes. One you take as a freshman, where we try to introduce you to all the different areas of media that we cover in the school and all the professional pathways that are out there and some things you need to prepare for. Because, some students, like in the sports media, when they come in as freshmen, we tell them straight up, you need to get involved in student media. You need to start getting repetitions. You need to start building these skill sets. Some people already have them coming in from high school. Others don't have any at all because they went to high schools that didn't have those as options. So we try to get people on that pathway as early as possible. And then when they get to their sophomore or junior level, we have a more area-specific career development class where we teach them, here's what a resume looks like in your area. Do you need a portfolio or a demo reel? Here's what that looks like. Here's an alum that you can talk to who's a good networking contact in this part of the industry or in that part of the industry. And then we also post a lot of internship opportunities, a lot of job opportunities. We give them help with interview prep, stuff like that. But on top of all of those things, what I really communicate to students is kind of twofold in media. A, if you want to work in media, you need to love working in media. I deal with this a lot in sports media where I have a lot of kids who come in. I'm like, why are you in the program? Like, well, I love sports. I was like, well, that's fine, but you need to learn to love media. You need to learn to love creating media, producing media, managing media, because you'll get tired of sports at some point. I always liken it to, imagine if your job, your profession was being an ice cream taster. Everybody's like, oh, it's great. I get to eat ice cream every day. That's amazing. Well, what if you had to do it every day? And what if you had to eat not just the ice cream flavors you liked, but all of the ones that you can't stand? Eventually you would get sick of ice cream. So within media and sports, I want you to learn to love sports media, and I want you to want to cover it. I want you to learn the rules. I want you to learn how the leagues work and everything. But I also want you to love being on air or writing or doing social media, because you might find better opportunities outside of sports, but still within media. So that's a big thing that we emphasize. I also emphasize consume media. If you want to work in this industry, it's remarkable today, the number of students that come in and they want to work in sports media or any other form of media. And I'm like, oh, great. Who's your favorite, sideline reporter, or who's your favorite writer? And they don't really have an answer. And I'm like, well, why not? And it turns out it's because they're not really watching or listening or reading closely to the media that they are pathing into from an industry perspective. And I was like, if you don't know what it's supposed to sound like or look like or feel like or read like, how are you going to produce it yourself? That's a huge leap. And so that's really where a lot of the messaging comes now. It's you have to consume what you're going to produce. You have to understand how it's supposed to feel and look. And then you have to network with people in that field. And you guys know this, this is a small industry. all of them are very small, relatively speaking. The people that are in them tend to know most of the other people in them. And a lot of times the difference between getting an internship or a job and not is who knows you, who's going to advocate for you, who's going to be willing to speak up and say, out of this pile of 300 resumes and demo reels we got, this is one of the 3 that we should actually look closely at. And so it's a lot to ask of 18 to 22-year-olds. But I tell the ones that are serious about it, like, these are the things you need to be thinking about before you graduate.
I thought it was so funny when you were talking about, who's your favorite sideline reporter, what have you, because being in the voice, industry for so long, it's like when the commercials are on, I turn it up because I'm like, I want to hear this guy's voice. And it's so funny because women that I've dated, friends that I have, they say, I listen to commercials a lot more differently, a lot more different now than I used to, because before it was just, okay, this is the time to go to the bathroom, or this is the time to, look at my phone. But it's like, now I hear them like, oh, that's what makes a good voiceover. Or, oh, is that Tom's voice I hear? He kind of sounds like, so it really is important. And also you can write that stuff off. I mean, from a tax standpoint, it's like, hey, I need to have DirecTV so I can absorb this media. And guess what? I can write that off every year. So you can kind of save some money too.
I mean, whether you want to be a journalist or whether you want to be a producer or a director or whether you want to be a public relations is kind of in its own category. There aren't a lot of people we look up to in PR and be like, ooh, I wish I'd written that brief. But especially in the forms of media where there are credits and names attached. So much of it is, I think, for a lot of students, and I actually blame to some degree the way that we handle this process in high school, where it's all about finding a direction that you think you would like, but not really diving deep into that direction and understanding it. It's funny, like, there's so much media out there now that we didn't have that I would have killed for. The other day it's funny you mentioned the voiceover thing, because Taco Bell announced that they were launching the Y2K menu. And so I copied it as like the Cool Ranch Dorito, like chalupa, stuff like that. So I sent that to my friends, and it sent me down this little rabbit hole in my brain, because I was like, what else did Taco Bell have that they could bring back from the Y2K era? And I was like, of course, the dog, the Taco Bell Chihuahua.
Yo quiero Taco Bell.
So I searched for the one there was one I wanted to send my friends as a joke. And the algorithm spit up not just the ad, which was the one where he comes out and looks like Che Guevara and goes, Viva Gorditas, and everybody cheers. But there was a video right underneath it that actually featured the voiceover artist that did that. And he gave this whole explanation about how he got the gig.
Really? Wow.
And how he had gone in, and the director of the spot, because it was a spec spot at that point, it hadn't even been given a green light yet, but they didn't want him to do a caricature like you normally heard in commercial advertisement back then for Hispanic voices. They wanted him to talk in his normal voice, and that became the voice that he used. And he was like, it was great because I would just show up, say like 4 lines, and then
out of there.
And then you'd be out of there, and it was like the most lucrative thing ever. And
he made hundreds of thousands of dollars. I mean,
and he would go on these press junkets, and they would introduce him, but the real star was the dog,
right?
Who, they would parade around, and it's just, the whole thing is fascinating to me. That's the kind of stuff I wish students that we'd had 25 years ago to deep dive on these things. But now you have to start at a more basic level, which is, media is so ephemeral to so many young people because of the way that TikTok works and the way that the algorithm works on Instagram. You're getting a small sample of everything. You're not necessarily getting the deep dive or like the consistent exposure to the things that we used to get exposure to. And you could always tell the kids that were really serious about going into certain parts of creative media back then, because they were junkies for this stuff. Like they would watch, they would go get the special edition DVD and watch all of the director notes and stuff like that. And so this is where it's tough to make that connection. I still have kids that are like that, but there's less of them now than there used to be. And that's going to be some interesting challenges for educators moving forward to get kids connected to the content, because they have the talent and they've got the ability to create, but they don't necessarily have the exposure to the medium.
Well, it's the same could be said for like the music industry. When we would buy an album, we would look at it, we'd read the inserts. You would, there'd maybe be a booklet, there'd be artwork, and now all you get's the song.
Yep.
That's it. I mean, you're lucky if you can find out some more information. But you have to, like you said, dive into a rabbit hole and search for that. Where when it was already presented to us, and we wanted to know more, we would buy the director's cut that had the, where he spoke along with the scenes and stuff.
Exactly.
I was talking to my son about this similar topic just yesterday, and he was just talking about how a lot of the songs now, like it's like social media where it kind of is geared towards people with short attention span, and it will shift multiple times within the same song just because people are, I don't know, just kind of lazy, or they just have such a small attention spans.
Well,
and I don't know if lazy is the right word, but it's more just that it doesn't appeal to them.
What it is.
I'll be honest, guys. I don't buy the short attention span stuff.
Really? Okay.
Here's why.
Okay.
I think that is an invention on the part of media companies because they don't have a good way of packaging longer form content. If this generation truly had that bad of attention spans, there would be nobody listening to or watching podcasts. Like podcasts are so long form and are so antithetical to the whole idea of people only watching something for 2 or 3 minutes or listening to something for a short period of time. I think it really has everything to do with people looking at TikTok and Instagram and assuming that that's just all that young people are consuming. They are still
fair.
They are still reading. They're listening to increasingly longer podcasts. They're even watching them. I think it's just a shift in the way that the consumption of things goes. And ultimately, like the song aspects and popular music using cliches that are proven, that's nothing new. It's just become more refined. The whole Max Martin approach to songwriting, where you're packing like 6 hooks into one song.
Yeah, like Bohemian Rhapsody or something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an age-old. It's just so much easier to do now.
Yeah, the Beatles did it in the '60s. I mean,
you can pack so much. There's another artist I can't think of, but like their whole thing was like, well, let's pack as many hooks as possible into a song because that seems to be what gets people to listen. And in pop music, that's always been the case. There's so much great music made under the surface. The big issue we have now is actually a very similar issue that podcasts have, which is how the hell do you find it? Like the idea of, okay, so I publish an album, I publish it on Spotify, I put it on my Instagram account. Okay, that exposes it to 1,200 people, 1,000 of which won't bother to listen to it. And I'm going to rely on an algorithm that's getting thousands of new songs pumped into it an hour and expect it to accurately find and put my stuff in front of people. I look at it simply as the biggest challenge in media right now, and I think this is the case for visual media too, as much as anything, is you can build audience. And once you do that, you've leaped over a boundary that many people will never leap over, not because their stuff isn't good and not because the audience isn't interested in it, but because the audience can't find it. And that to me is the big nut that we need to crack here in media over the next 10 to 15 years, because there's so much good stuff that I still haven't found. And the little that I've found that my friends and colleagues haven't found, like we rely on each other as almost like a search engine, because otherwise we have no idea what's out there. And I think for young people, they use themselves for that.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating watching something out of the blue. And this is where, I think about back, one of the last episodes of Breaking Bad, they had a Badfinger song in it. And it ended up topping the iTunes charts for 2 weeks. And people were like, wow, this band's amazing. It's like, yeah, no crap. It was Badfinger. It was one of the most effective pop bands of for a 5-year period in the late 60s, early 70s. But if you never exposed to it,
right,
you don't know. And that I find fascinating right now about the industry.
I found it when you were talking earlier about the attention spans and people listening to a podcast, especially if it's something that they're interested. Like you and I love football, as an example. Does that mean we're not going to sit there and watch a 3-hour NFL game? We're going to go straight to YouTube afterwards and watch the condensed 15-minute version because our attention span's too short? No. If it's something you're passionate about, you're willing to put that time in, and it doesn't matter, how long it takes.
Yeah. It's a really, really great point, and it's one I try to make to people often. And it's one of the tough things about teaching creative media or production in media, which is that what you are creating things, but you have to make them entertaining and you have to tie them to something that people are interested in. And that combination is tough because there are not that many people that are naturally engaging and entertaining. You can develop that over time, but most students aren't born. I did not have the on-air persona that I have now when I was 18 or 19 years old.
I was on B97 sounding like an idiot.
Right. So these things take repetitions.
Yeah.
They take time, but you also have to realize after a while, like, what is interesting to this group of people. The podcast I do, it's fallen into an interesting mix where there's a ton of IU. IU has the largest living alumni base in the United States. It's larger than Penn State, larger than Texas. I mean, it's got 900,000 living alumni. I mean, we got 8,300 people subscribed on YouTube, which is a great number on YouTube. But guess what? That means that there are, hundreds of thousands of IU fans or potential IU fans that aren't even aware that the show exists. So it really becomes like, there's hundreds of not hundreds, maybe dozens of IU podcasts that maybe have a tenth of our listenership if they're lucky. But that's just because we've been doing it longer than anybody else. But we're still at a threshold where it's like, how do we get it in front of all these other people who would be interested if they only knew that it existed? And what you said, Tom, about people will deep dive. People will absolutely deep dive on things that they're interested in. I mean, The Ringer had a great podcast series where they would deep dive on the Star Wars trilogies, or they would deep dive on television series or Game of Thrones. They would have a whole show where they would, just be people talking about the episode that everybody just watched after it dropped on HBO. That's the key, is like, how do you find things that you can connect to what people's interests are and make it stand out enough that people want to go listen to your interpretation of that media item that they just listened to or watched.
This has been so fascinating, but I have an honest question for you. What are you doing for the Oregon game? Where are you going to be watching that? Because you know what? My DirecTV doesn't get hooked up in my new place until Monday, and I want to go someplace either to like Nick's or some bar to watch it, or watch it with someone like you who's truly passionate about it. So what's your plan for the game?
I'm going to be in the stadium.
You're going?
I'm going. Yeah. I'm flying out there on Friday and meeting some friends, and we're going to go watch the game. I've been to Eugene to a football game once. It was 15 years ago. Sorry. So I've always wanted to go back, and the fact that IU's playing there, that's the great thing about IU being in a conference that now has all of these Pac-12 teams or former Pac-12 teams in them. We went to UCLA last year, so got to see a game in the Rose Bowl. Going to Eugene this year, planning on going out to Washington next year when they play the Huskies. I will be happy to recommend the Upstairs Pub as a place to go watch the game if there's seats available, because they've blown it out. Like, it's much different than anybody.
This is the one that used to be above Hooligans, kind of in that little area.
And
so
now
that's a really good place to watch it. See, I was thinking Nick's just because that's all I know.
Nick's is also good, but you should try the Upstairs experience because it is a true sports bar on the west side now. It's got huge banks of televisions, raised roof, huge bar. It's probably the most unique experience for watching games in Bloomington right now. So that would be my recommendation.
So right across the street from Nick's, right there.
Yeah, you can't miss it.
Because you said west side, and I thought there was another one.
The upstairs, the way it's set up now,
there's the west.
There's a west side and an east side.
And there's a little thing in between where you can walk outside, right?
Exactly, yes.
Well, that's where I'm going to go to watch it. I'm sorry that you won't be there, but we're definitely going to be in touch, obviously, and hopefully catch some games. Galen, it's been great, and I'll be seeing you in Bloomington soon. I'll definitely invite you over for a beer and check out my new digs once I get all set up. But thank you so much for taking some time out of your obviously very busy schedule to join us on this podcast. We really appreciate it.
It was a delight, guys. Yeah, thank you. Great meeting you, and I appreciate the time, and look forward to hearing this when it's published, and best of luck with the show as you guys move forward.
Great. Thank you so much. Man, so cool.
He's such a cool dude. Like I said, the first time I met him, here I am at this reception, for the career day. And, you know, and I talking to him, like, I got a good vibe off of him already. You know, I could just tell this guy seems cool. You know, he looked cool, you know, he looked cool. He acted cool, and he's so smart and so well-spoken. I mean, just seeing him do that sideline interview with no and these were questions that he didn't know were thrown at him. And he represents the university in such a positive way, where here's this guy that's hip and cool, but also smart as fucking hell. You know, it's like knows his shit.
And did I hear you say that he has a PhD?
Yes, he does.
So
he's a doctor.
He's Dr. G.
Yeah.
I love that. Cool. Is that what you're going to call him? Hey, Dr. G.
Dr. G and the Hizzle. The next one we record will be from my new place in Bloomington, so you won't be seeing this background, except for a couple that we've pre-recorded already. But all right, buddy. Well, hey, have a great rest of yours, and until then, later dude.
Common D.
Two middle-aged idiots.
This podcast is produced by 224 Media with voice and audio support by Fry on the Fly Productions.